Darkest Dungeon 2 is here, and in classic Red Hook fashion, the game is brutally hard and punishing at every turn. Hey there friends, it's Codiak here, welcome back to Legacy Gaming. Today, I'm diving in and sharing everything I wish I knew sooner about Darkest Dungeon 2. There's nothing worse than feeling like you're stuck in the mud, and when it comes to Darkest Dungeon 2, a few simple mistakes can lead to your demise. Here's the deal, DD2 is in early access, which means things are going to change over the course of the next year or so. That means these tips might lose a little potency depending on what the developers change, tweak, and add into the game, but I did my best to compile a bunch of useful information for players just starting out on their journey to the mountain. When it comes to Darkest Dungeon 2, knowledge is power, and when you're looking for information, there's no better landmark than the Watchtower. Stopping at this location reveals every node in the entire region, and it's easily the best stop you can make, especially early on in a biome. The game is all about making choices, and no decision is more important than which path to travel as you steer your wagon through a crumbling world. Easily, the most impactful landmark in the game is the Shrine of Reflection. One stop here and you'll learn a bit more about your heroes in the party, and more importantly, unlock a new ability for them to use. Red Hook expanded the pool of abilities to 11 in Darkest Dungeon 2, which means you have a lot of flexibility to rework your team while on the road. The Shrine of Reflection is a must-stop location and one that you should always keep an eye out for in every single zone. Pull up your map and do a quick scan before setting off on your journey, and never miss an opportunity to advance your heroes. Once you start unlocking new hero abilities, you need to put them to good use. This is more of a quality of life tip than anything else because it burned me more than I'd like to admit. Every time you start a new run, you need to readjust what abilities your heroes have. This is as simple as going into the character screen, unselecting the abilities you don't want, and selecting the ones you do want. It may seem silly, but it's one of those things that can easily slip the mind. I should also point out that you can change these abilities at any time, so long as you're not actively in combat. This is a change from the original game, and one that takes a bit of getting used to, but once you have a pool of 11 moves unlocked, making changes on the fly can mean the difference between life and death. Regardless of how many abilities you have unlocked, you're going to lose heroes. That's just the nature of the game, but before you abandon your run, you might be interested to know that heroes are actually replaced at the end. It all depends on how many additional heroes you have unlocked. For example, if you're running with the Man-at-Arms, Runaway, Highwayman, and Plague Doctor, and you lose one of them along the way, and you have the Hellion unlocked, she'll actually join your party once you reach an inn. That being said, reaching an inn is not such an easy feat, so if you can survive long enough to get there, you might just be able to salvage your run. One thing that's sure to derail you is Loathing, and honestly, this is just one of those systems I missed early on because I was so focused on the other things in the game. While on the road, you'll notice some skulls in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. This represents Loathing, and it's a scaling difficulty system that has to be managed at all times. It's as simple as this: avoid too many combat situations and the Loathing increases. At max Loathing, your Flame of Hope drains 200% faster, and there's a 20% chance that enemies will start combat with an advantage. Realize this too, the lower the Flame of Hope, the additional advantages enemies will have, and if your flame reaches 0, you'll be ambushed by cultists, so you can see it all really comes down to keeping Loathing in check. To keep Loathing low, you need to engage in resistance encounters. These are noted on the map with 2 crossed swords and represent combat scenarios in each region. For every fight you conquer, you'll drop the Loathing level by 1. Sadly, it's not as clear when Loathing rises, but it's best not to test the theory and just keep things in check. Loathing is just one of the systems you need to keep in check during your run. Darkest Dungeon 2 is all about balance, and if you hope to make it to the mountain, you'll learn quickly enough how to strike a balance between all things. There are really a few key areas you need to focus on. The first, as we already said, is Loathing, making sure to engage in resistance encounters, keeping that in check, and preventing enemies from running rampant. The second is your Torch, or Hope as it's referred to sometimes in the game. The only way to increase this is by stopping at the Desperate Few. Here you'll have the choice which hero interacts with the group of travelers, and oftentimes you can restore a fair amount of hope and even pick up some items. You'll also need to manage those very same items. That may sound ridiculous, but because of the way combat items work in Darkest Dungeon 2, it's essential that you have enough items you can lean on when in combat. The best thing about these is that they don't actually take up a hero's turn, so you can really make great use of combat items every step along the way. The best items can be found at the Academic Cache, a safe stop along the road that rewards you with a whole mess of items based on your profile level. You can also stop at the Hoarder if you have the baubles and relics to pay, but when push comes to shove, take the free option. Balance is of paramount importance because the last stop before an inn is a Guardian encounter. These are often the most challenging fights in the zone, and pit your team against an elite squad of enemies. This is why keeping everything in equilibrium is so important. Loathing maxed out? Well, expect the enemies to gain a substantial edge. Little to no hope? Same deal, the enemies will be buffed to the max. No items? Well, you lose your one real edge in combat. Take everything in stride and you'll be fine, but tip the scales too far in one direction and everything will come crashing down. I've mentioned a few times now your player profile. This is the progression system in the game, and I wanted to quickly bring everyone up to speed on how that works. DD2 is a roguelite. That means when you die, you start back at square one. But there is a system helping propel you forward. That's where the player profile comes into the picture. With each level, you unlock new items, quirks, and sometimes heroes. And here's the thing that may trip up a few of you. You're not actually unlocking those items now. You're basically adding them into the world to find later. You start with nothing, and that never changes, but with a higher player profile, you'll have access to new items at shops or when looting items from landmarks like the Academic Caches. This may be a no-brainer for some of you, but I think it's vitally important that everyone's on the same page regarding this system. Speaking of items, here's a quick tip. Did you know that those piles on the road actually have a chance to drop items? That's right, everything from baubles to combat items can be looted just by hitting the debris in the road with your wagon. Personally, I have a hard time controlling the wagon, but with loot so easily obtained, I swallow my pride and just make it happen. It may not seem like much, but 2 baubles here, a combat item there, they do add up and can really make an impact on your run. At the time of making this video, Darkest Dungeon 2 only has a few biomes, and while many more will be added over the course of early access, one thing will always remain true. Each zone leans into a different status effect within the game. This is critically important to understand because with that knowledge under your belt, you'll be able to equip the right items and right abilities to make an impact in combat. For example, when fighting the Plaguebringers in the fodder, you need to realize that those enemies have a natural resistance to the Blight status effect. That means you might need to retool your Plague Doctor for a more melee-focused build, something that will make more of an impact when in combat. In the same vein, enemies will also lean into their own specific type of damage. For instance, the Fanatics in the Sprawl heavily rely on fire-based attacks, resulting in a lot of burn statuses. You can easily offset this by equipping combat items that stop burn. Add on to that the special one-off combat scenarios that can completely change the dynamic of a fight. These happen quickly, and if you're not paying attention, you might miss them. Always start combat by checking the upper left-hand corner of the screen. Sometimes you'll fight a special group of enemies with improved stats that's going to drastically change how you approach a fight. Affixes come in all shapes and sizes, some adding debuffs to your team and others adding buffs to the enemies. It's a puzzle every step of the way, and while it may not be obvious, there's always a solution to every problem. Just get to know the factions, learn their strengths and weaknesses, and outfit your team accordingly. Road battles are an ever-present annoyance in Darkest Dungeon 2, but did you know the map actually reveals how to avoid them? That's right, I'm kicking myself for not realizing this sooner. If you look at the map, you'll notice some of the lines between landmarks are dotted and some are solid. Those dotted lines will always contain a road battle, while the solid lines won't. It's easy to overlook, but now, armed with the knowledge, you can choose to engage or avoid the enemy of your own volition. I also want to remind everyone that road battles are timed. Surviving 5 rounds may seem like the best option, but if you don't kill the enemies, you don't get any rewards. That means no items, and more importantly, no mastery points. The game's newest system, relationships, can often be the sole reason why a run goes horribly wrong. You have to pay attention to the interactions of your heroes and avoid pushing them too far. Some interactions are easy enough to identify, like when one hero is jealous of another hero's killing blow, but others are hard to pin down, and there's usually deeper interactions you need to unpack. Nothing can rip apart a relationship faster than stress. In Darkest Dungeon 2, heroes can accumulate 10 stress before they have a meltdown. This is the single biggest debilitating effect in the game, as a meltdown triggers a massive loss of HP and shatters the relationships that hero has with the rest of the team. The only way to offset stress is by using items and abilities. In items are the best way to reduce the burden a hero is under, but by the time you actually reach an inn, it might be too late. One of the first and easiest instances of stress removal comes when you unlock the Jester at level 9. This hero comes standard with Inspiring Tune, which reduces the stress of a targeted hero by 2. You can upgrade this at the Mastery Trainer to reduce stress by 3, which is a game changer. It may not seem like much now, but it has saved me multiple times from having meltdowns, and coupled with some of the more advanced stress-reducing combat items, it's a great way to keep things in check. This is the game's progression system working as intended, but it's also important to identify when these things are becoming issues. You might think unlocking the Jester is just cool, but realizing that it can actually transform your run, well, that's the real secret. The same goes for the combat items. You'll pick up a lot of these throughout your run, and you'll need to keep managing them to make the most of their effects. Like I've said multiple times now, it's about balance in anything and everything within the game. The final tip has to do with specific region-based quirks and quests. When selecting a zone, realize that each region has a randomly generated quirk that's going to play a big part in the adventures that's about to unfold. For example, the Curious quirk automatically scouts all academic studies and increases how many studies there are in that zone. In the same vein, something like Healing Ways allows you to scout all the field hospitals and increases how many of them there actually are. Note that all quirks are not good, and sometimes you'll run across ones that reduce your resistances or buff your enemies, so it's important to pay attention before making a decision. On top of the zone-wide quirks, you'll also have a small quest associated with each leg of the journey. By completing the quest, you'll unlock an additional reward like a large chunk of hope, extra mastery points, and even trinkets. I wouldn't say completing these are required, but they definitely help and really give you an edge that you otherwise wouldn't have. Take an extra second before selecting your next zone and scout out the options, because I promise you won't regret it. And there you have it, everything I wish I knew sooner about Darkest Dungeon 2. Like I said, early access is just getting underway, and with more content coming to the game over the next year, there will be no shortage of new tips and tricks that pop up. If this video did help you on your journey to the mountain, we'd love your support. Hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. It's still the single best way to help channels like ours reach new audiences. We also invite you to join us on Discord. We've got a great crew of around 7,000 members with a special section dedicated just for Darkest Dungeon 2, so check out the link below and join today. Finally, if you like everything we're doing here at Legacy Gaming and you want to support us even more, you can now do so by becoming a member. For just a couple bucks, you're helping evolve the channel and take our community to that next level. Check out the join button below to learn more. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.